Try this experiment. Sit alone for 10 minutes. No phone, no music, no television, no conversation, just your thoughts. Most people become uncomfortable surprisingly fast. Why does this feel uncomfortable? Why do we constantly reach for something to do? These questions became the subject of a fascinating experiment. In 2014, researchers at the University of Virginia asked participants to sit alone with their thoughts. The task sounded simple. No phone, no external stimulation, just thinking. A surprising number of participants struggled with it. The researchers gave participants access to an electric shock. Then the researchers left them alone. They could either sit quietly or give themselves the shock. What happened next surprised everyone. Several participants chose to shock themselves, not because they enjoyed it, because they preferred it to sitting alone. Some people chose discomfort over a few minutes of uninterrupted thought. It revealed something strange about the human mind. Many people are uncomfortable being alone with themselves, but that creates a bigger question. What exactly are we avoiding? Silence itself is harmless. Waiting is harmless. Doing nothing is harmless. So why do they feel difficult? To answer that, we need to understand how the mind behaves when stimulation disappears. Normally, our attention is constantly occupied. Messages, notifications, entertainment, something is always happening. Something is always pulling our attention outward. Silence changes that. When external stimulation disappears, attention turns inward, and suddenly, thoughts become louder. Unfinished worries appear. Old memories appear. Future concerns appear. Things we successfully ignored during the day begin demanding attention. This is why silence often feels less comfortable than expected. Has humanity always been like this? Or is this a modern problem? The answer is both. Human beings have always struggled with their own thoughts, but modern life amplified the problem. For most of human history, stimulation was limited. No smartphones, no streaming platforms, no endless notifications. Periods of silence happened naturally. People walked without headphones. People spent time alone with their thoughts. Today, that is becoming rare. The average person can eliminate almost every moment of boredom. A few seconds of waiting appears. The phone comes out. A moment of silence appears. Music begins playing. A difficult emotion appears. A distraction quickly follows. Many people train themselves to escape stillness, and the brain learns quickly. It starts expecting stimulation constantly. The more stimulation we consume, the harder stillness becomes, and the harder stillness becomes, the more stimulation we seek. A cycle begins forming. But this raises another question. If silence feels uncomfortable, why did so many ancient traditions actively seek it? Why would monks choose silence? Why would philosophers choose solitude? Why would some people spend years practicing the very thing others avoid? To answer that, we need to look at what they discovered. Across different cultures, many thinkers noticed the same pattern. People can spend years avoiding themselves. They stay busy, they stay distracted, occupied, yet they rarely stop to examine their own mind. The ancient Buddhists noticed this. The Stoics noticed this. Many spiritual traditions noticed this. They all arrived at a similar conclusion. A distracted mind is difficult to understand, difficult to control. That is why silence became important, because silence exposed reality. Silence removes the escape routes. For a few moments, there is nowhere else to go, only your thoughts remain, and people discover they do not enjoy their own mental company. That realization may sound harsh, but it leads to an important insight. Maybe silence is not the problem. Maybe the real problem is what we encounter when both disappear, and that changes the question entirely. The question is no longer, why do people need stimulation? The question becomes, what are people trying not to experience? And that question takes us to the heart of the issue. What are people trying not to experience? For some people, it is worry. The moment silence appears, the mind starts imagining problems. Future problems, financial problems, relationship problems, problems that may never happen. Yet the mind continues creating them anyway. For others, it is regret. Things long forgotten suddenly reappear. For others, it is uncertainty. Silence gives those questions room to speak, and many people would rather not hear them. This is why distraction feels so attractive. Distraction does something simple. It postpones discomfort, not removes it. A video can postpone it, Social media can postpone it. Constant activity can postpone it. But eventually, the mind catches up. That is why some people can stay busy all day, yet still feel restless. The problem was never solved. It was only delayed. This is where many people make a critical mistake. They assume stimulation creates happiness. But stimulation and happiness are not the same thing. Excitement is not happiness. Entertainment is not happiness. Distraction is not peace. They are completely different experiences. A person can be highly stimulated and deeply unhappy. We see this constantly. People surrounded by entertainment, yet unable to sit quietly. People always connected, yet feeling strangely empty. This is not because stimulation is evil. The problem is dependence. When stimulation becomes necessary, freedom starts disappearing. If you cannot sit quietly, silence controls you. If you cannot be alone, solitude controls you. If you constantly need distraction, distraction controls you. A person deeply engaged with life does not constantly seek stimulation because attention is already occupied. A craftsman building something, a musician practicing something, a scientist studying something. They are not bored, not because stimulation arrived, because attention became focused. This is an important distinction. The mind naturally seeks engagement. When meaningful engagement disappears, cheap stimulation often replaces it. And modern technology supplies an endless amount of it. If constant stimulation creates this cycle, how do we break it? How do we become comfortable with silence again? The answer is surprisingly simple. Because the solution requires facing the very thing we escape. Silence, not for hours or days, just small moments, moments without distraction, stimulation, escape. At first, it feels uncomfortable. The mind has been trained to expect constant input. When that input disappears, restlessness appears. The mistake is assuming something is wrong. Nothing is wrong. You are simply noticing what was already there. The distractions were hiding them. This is why many meditation teachers give surprisingly simple instructions. Sit, observe, notice. That is all. Not because sitting is magical, because observation creates awareness, and awareness creates choice. This was the discovery made by many ancient traditions. Not that silence solves everything, but silence reveals things, and what is revealed can finally be understood. A person who never sits quietly may spend years running from the same problem. A person who stops and looks has a chance to understand it. This is why solitude was valued by philosophers. This is why silence was valued by monks, because they understood. A distracted mind reacts, an aware mind responds. There is a difference. Reaction is automatic. Response is intentional. Today, we live in the most stimulated period in human history. Entertainment is always available. Distraction is always available. Noise is always available. But something else is becoming rare. Stillness. The ability to sit quietly, wait patiently, the ability to do nothing. These once felt normal, now they feel difficult. The inability to sit still is not the problem itself, it is a symptom. A symptom that we have become uncomfortable with our own minds. The real discomfort begins when there is nothing left to distract us, only ourselves, and that may be the hidden reason silence feels uncomfortable. It forces a meeting that many people have postponed for years. The strange thing is, that meeting is exactly what many ancient traditions were trying to encourage, because understanding begins there. So perhaps the question is not, why do we need constant stimulation? But, what happens when the stimulation disappears? Because the answer to that question reveals far more about us than the stimulation ever could. And maybe that is why so many people struggle to sit still. Because silence reveals what has been there all along. For most of history, wisdom was not associated with constant activity. It was associated with reflection. Today, mind constantly distracted rarely has time to understand itself. And a mind that never understands itself is easily controlled by impulses, emotions, and habits. This is why the ability to sit quietly is more valuable than it first appears. It is about becoming aware of what drives you, what worries you, and what controls you. The goal is freedom to enjoy stimulation without depending on it, the freedom to be alone without feeling uncomfortable, the freedom to sit in silence without needing an escape. That is why monks valued silence. That is why philosophers valued solitude. And that is why this ancient lesson may be more relevant today than ever before. That is why waiting feels uncomfortable. That is why doing nothing feels uncomfortable. And that is why so many people struggle to sit still, because it removes everything else to show empty version of you, which is real and true. Consider subscribing for more wisdom.